Hello friends, today we will be starting the new series on anthropology. This is the lecture 1 of the series. In total, I plan to cover around 300 videos covering both the papers within the next 6 months. So let's start with the syllabus without wasting time. Now you can see some of the themes in the anthropology. This is about how the human evolution took place in the physical form. This is Gregor Mendel showing the human genetics theme of the anthropology. This is Jane Goodall with chimpanzee, a very famous study, and was also asked in the UPSC this year. These represent the Indian tribes, which will be covering in the paper too. This represents the racial studies in anthropology, identify the Negroids, the Protoids, and the Australoids and the Mongoloids. This represents the linguistic anthropology theme, how the speech apparatus changes and leads to the development of the vocal abilities. This represents the archaeological aspect of the anthropology. This is a cave from the Sungir, Russia, where the man is lying down with all his jewelries. This finally represents the caste system of India, which will be taking up in the paper too. So we're now starting with the unit 1.1, meaning, scope, and development of anthropology. Now, what is the definition of anthropology? The origin of the term is from the anthropos, that is the human beings, and logos, that is the science. So, anthropology is the science of human beings, but it's a very crude understanding. So, let's move to some definitions. Anthropology may be defined as the study of man and his works. So, what are the aspects of the man to be studied, and what are the works to be studied are dealt with in the anthropology. And the most comprehensive definition that one can write in the exam is anthropology is the scientific study of the physical, the social, and the cultural development of the human beings since their appearance on this earth. So this has all the components, the physical, social, and cultural, and since their inception. So it is also having the time element in this its definition. So what does this definition tell about? It says that anthropology studies humans across the time and space. That is, holistic study of humans in time and space, covering all the aspects, whether the economy, whether the religion, whether the marriage, family, and different kind of institutions are studied in anthropology. Also, we know that humans are not same across the time. That is, a lot of origin and evolution is going on. Humans are not same. They were like 2 lakh years ago, 20 million years ago. They were different. We originated from some last common ancestors. Then we moved to Ardipithecus ramidus, then to Australopithecus enemensis, then to Homo ergaster. And this way we have reached to till where we have reached today. So earlier we were not bipedal. We had smaller brains. We were arboreal, but now these traits have changed. So the humans have evolved since time. Also, in the space, there is a lot of differences as we see that due to the difference in environment, like in the equatorial region, we have negroid kind of elements are visible in the rays. In the polar regions, there is more frequency of the Caucasoid racial elements. That is, there is leptorrhea, there is uh, long stature, the short and thick stature, and these elements. So there is a lot of variation that exists across the space. So now we deal with the nature and scope of anthropology. So in anthropology, there are 5 branches and 6 unique approaches that are the hallmarks of anthropology and comprises of the scope of the anthropology. The 5 branches are physical anthropology, sociocultural anthropology, linguistic anthropology, archaeology, and applied anthropology. And the 6 unique approaches are the evolutionary approach, the historical approach, Then there is the cross-cultural approach, there is holistic approach, then cultural relativism, fieldwork, and emic ethic. So let us discuss these themes in a broader way. So what are the branches of anthropology? I'm discussing here in a very narrow way. While dealing with the topic 1.3, we'll be dealing with these topics in the detail and how to write the exam answers. So in the physical anthropology, they can be seen as six primary classifications, which includes the paleoanthropology, that is the study of fossils, like how Australopithecus features were there, how Neanderthal were there, how they evolved into humans. So this kind of sequence is studied in paleoanthropology. Then there is primatology, which studies the primate behavior, the primate locomotion, the position of the humans as primates, and other different elements, which will be covered later in the unit 1.5. And then we have these next four elements are covered in the unit 9.1 to 12. So 9.1 to 9.4 covers the human genetics portion of the anthropology, which studies about the man family study, which itself comprises of many different tools like pedigree analysis, twin study, then there is co-foster twin studies, there are cytogenetic methods and other different kinds of methods. Then in the unit 9.2, which is covered under human genetics, we study about the monogenic and polygenic inheritance and how they are different, how some of the traits follow the Mendelian traits and other do not follow the Mendelian traits, and what is the reason behind that. Then in the unit 9.3, we study the population genetics, which comprises of the factors that bring in changes in the gene pool of the humans. And here we come across the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium and the conditions that lead to changes in the gene pool, like the mutation, the natural selection, the genetic drift, and some others also. And finally, in the 9.4, we study about the chromosomal aberrations. And in the unit 9.5 to 9.8, these units cover about the variations in the humans across the space. Like uh, 9.5 study about the racial traits in the humans, like what are the different races, how they're classified on the basis of blood groups and certain other criteria. And then 9.6 also studies the same on the basis of different criteria like HLA, fat characteristics, and different kind of characteristics. Then there's the 9.7 unit, which also studies the human variation due to the environmental factors, like how there are different kind of adaptations which arises due to hot climate or which arises due to cold climate. Like in the hot climate, there will be broader nose, uh, thinner limbs, as there's a rule called Allen's rule, and uh, then we have the unit 10, which studies about the growth and developmental studies, which shows about how growth and development are different, what are the different stages of growth and development, how there are different stages like aging, senescence is there, adolescence there, what are the different theories of aging, what are the different kind of somatotypes that is observed in the growth and development process. So these things we covered in the growth and development studies. And the last one is the unit 11, which comprises of the reproductive and demography, which deals with the different theories of demography and the factors of menarche, fertility, and different kind of things. So next is socio-cultural anthropology, which can be seen from the unit 2.1 to unit 5. So from unit 2.3 to unit 2.5, we have the study of family, marriage, and kinship. So how marriage is the fundamental unit for the family and the kinship, and how what are the different kind of marriage rules, what are the different kind of families, what is the universality of family, how the family is changing with time, how there are different kind of kinship rules, descent rules, how they lead to formation of different kind of descent groups, and all these things we'll be covering. And because this is not a static process, it's a process which is changing with time, like how kinship is evolving with time, how now we are not dependent on the lineals but rather more on the collaterals. So these processes will also be studied. Also how the marriage is changing. Earlier this was like most societies had man-female relationship, and now there is emergence of gay relationships, single mother relationships, and different kind of relationships are coming up. Even the families have become from joint families to nuclear families, and so there's a lot of changes which is going on within these space. The next topic is about economic anthropology, and we'll be covering them in detail. I'm just giving an introduction to uh, get you acquainted with anthropology. And the next is economic anthropology, which studies about the different kinds of modes of production, distribution, and certain other phenomena. So we'll be covering them in detail anyways. Then next is political anthropology. It studies about how the political power is distributed in the society, what is the level of centralization and other things which determine how the power structure follows. And lastly is the religion anthropology. It deals about how the evolution of the religion takes place. What are the different kind of religion in the society? What are the different kind of rituals? What are the different kind of religious practitioners in the society? So this is about the socio-cultural anthropology. And then is the linguistic anthropology. It has basically three main branches: the historical branch, the structural branch, and the social linguistics. So historical linguistics deal about how the origin of the language take place, different kind of biological theories of origin, and the social theories of origin of languages, which will be covering in the unit 7. And then there is the structural anthropology, which tells about how there are different kind of units which are called phenomes that arrange in a particular combination to give words and other kind of meanings to this. And lastly, we have social linguistics that tells about how there is a relationship between language, culture, and thought, and how the social context of the language is there, like how people vary while speaking to people of higher status compared to them. So all these will be covered under the social linguistic portion of the chapter 7. And finally, we have archaeology, the prehistoric and the historic archaeology, and the ethnoarchaeology. So we'll be covering them in the details in the unit 1.3, which will be the third video from now. And lastly, we have applied anthropology. It deals with anthropometry and the designing of the equipments. That is, it sees how the humans vary in their limb size, and different kinds of measurements are used for designing the equipments. Like there are turret guns, there are trains, and there are military equipments of different types. Then we have nutritional anthropology, which assesses the qualitative and quantitative criteria of nutrition. Like it has different kinds of method, like Shakir method, which measures the nutritional status. Then there is also a method of qualitative analysis, that is how certain taboos, because this entire study is about biocultural. This is not that biology is different than culture. This is an interrelated study. Biology is affecting culture, culture is affecting the biology. So this shows that because of certain food taboos, there is a lot of nutritional malnutrition existing in some of the societies, like because of let's say vegetarianism in Hindus. So we have a lot of anemia problems, right? So this is all. And then there is sports anthropology, which is also known as anthropometry, and Bill D. Ross started this concept. So it studies about how different uh, somatotypes are useful for particular kind of sports. What is the a particular kind of nutrition that is important for the sports. So such aspects will be covered with the sports anthropology, and because it's a cultural aspect, so we'll also be dealing with how sports is linked to cultural aspect. And then finally we have forensic anthropology that studies different kind of crime investigations, personal identification, and using different kind of formulas, which we'll be covering in the unit 12. Now coming to the nature and scope of the anthropology. So as we have seen, after the branches, there were some unique hallmarks of anthropology, like the evolutionary perspective. So evolution basically means the change with time. It does not decide the direction, whether it's positive change or it's a negative change. It just talks about there's a change with the time. And because usually evolution forms the initial portion of any discipline, it's the part of initial studies in any discipline. So even in anthropology, the evolutionists form the first approach, and like the classical evolutionists came into picture, and the paleo anthropology came into picture, which was studying the biological evolution, and classical evolutionists were studying the evolution of the social institutions. So because anthropology has both biological evolution as well as the cultural evolution. So biological evolution is studied in the form of fossil studies, and cultural evolution again has two elements: the material aspects and the non-material aspects. The material aspects are studied in the archaeological study, and the non-material aspects are studied in the social institutions and the ideology of religion and different kind of these ideologies. So, for example, like human biological evolution is like humans evolved from Ardipithecus to Homo sapiens. So, this tree can be seen, and it shows that how Ardipithecus rhamnosus changed to this Homo rudolphinensis, then Homo habilis, then Homo ergaster, and finally ends up Homo sapiens. And similarly, in archaeology, we know that the sequence is from Paleolithic to Mesolithic to Neolithic, and so on. So also this can be seen in the form of social institutions. Like Fraser studied the magic, religion, science chronology, where he says that in the initial period, the primitive man had a flawed concept of science, and magic was followed. It was cohesive in nature, and then when man realized the futility of magic, then he moves to religion, where in place of coercion, he started propitiating the nature to achieve the goals of happiness and different kinds of things. And finally, even when the religion was not working out, they found out that science is the real truth, and it's based on the real cause and effect, and can help humans alleviate their sufferings. So the most evolved societies, as according to the Fraser, are following science. But as Ivan Pritchard says that all the societies have science, magic, and religion existing at the same time. Like even today, our society has a very advanced science, but we see magic pots are hanging outside our homes. We follow a lot of rituals like Ekadashi, Vrata, and different kinds of, but which shows that religion is also coexisting. So it shows that there is always a coexistence. And finally, also it can be seen in the sphere of political thing, like how band evolves into tribe, tribe evolves into chiefdom, and the highest point is of state. So this is how the evolutionary perspective works. Then the next is the comparative perspective. Since anthropology studies the similarities and differences that appear and evolve in human biology, culture, and behavior, so anthropology is hallmark in comparative perspective. For example, biologically we see there are racial variations due to environment, like epicanthic folds in the mongoloids and leptorine nose in caucasoids. Also, in the cultural aspects, we see there are different kinds of redistribution in different kinds of society. For example, there is a culture of potlatch and Quaikatul, which is a fishing society. So there is a scarcity cycle which goes on. So there are periods where they will redistribute the entire capture, and feasting will be going on. It might look like waste of wealth, but it has the concept of getting social prestige and social credit. So in the times of scarcity, they can look up to the other bands. Also, in the societies like Coicatul, which do not have evolved state system like us, these events form important events that where the chiefs try to exert their political authority through the ostentatious display of wealth and generosity. Also, similarly, the redistribution in Indian joint family is very different from Potlatch. So we see, and also in the state systems, there's a tax system which is based. So this shows that there is a lot of variation in the societies, despite the goal being same of redistribution, based on the level of evolution of state. Then the next is holism. So, as anthropology studies the human behavior, biology, and culture as the outcome of all aspects like the biology, economy, politics, religion, etc., etc. It's a holistic study. It doesn't isolate different elements. It understands everything as an interrelated phenomena. Like for example, Malinowski A functionalist studied Kula exchange. So can be seen as a ceremonial exchange. But if we go into the deeper realities of Kula, then it is not only the economic function, it also has a lot of religious function, educational functions, and different kind of functions. Like when they are leaving for this trading function, there is a lot of religious activity which goes on while making the boats. Making boats also serves as an education function for the children. It also serves an economic function because if it doesn't happen, then there will not no goods exchanged. So it has all the functions at the same time. So we have already discussed how humans are a holistic unit. So biology, social, linguistic, and archaeology all interrelated. Then there are evolutionary and cross-cultural aspects, which we have already discussed, and I have just summarized them in this slide. You can take notes of them later. Then we have the fourth, which is the cultural relativism. So there was a period in anthropology where there were a lot of racial and eugenics movement going on by Galton, Davenport, and in the cultural sphere also there were cultural evolutionists like Taylor who were taking a very ethnocentric basis of studying the cultures. So Boas come and tries to introduce the concept of cultural relativism, whereby he says that no cultural practice is good or bad and must be viewed from the society's own logic and not judged using the standards of one's own culture. It means that we should not be judging the other cultures based on what we have learned in our culture. Our cultures have different environment, different situation compared to other cultures. So it will be unfair on our part if we judge other cultures by our own values. For example, infanticide or abandonment of baby by the Inuit Eskimos may seem to be very unfair to the baby, but it is due to the food scarcity situations. It often leads to such desperate situations where they will eat up their own child. So they prefer to leave their child so that a lesser desperate group can find the child and can be raised by them. Also, in the Indian society, we have the concept of sacred cow. So it looks like an animal is considered sacred, but if you go into the deeper reality and understand the situation of why this concept arises, we see that cow has dual utility in the Indian circumstances. First, it gives dairy products like ghee, milk, etc., which help farmer raise their nutrition. And second, it gives birth to oxen, which can be used to plow the fields. So, in a farming community, these things become very important, and so the farming community worships cow. And it is not an aberration now, if you understand from this perspective. Then the next is the practice of potlatch, as we have already discussed, that it may look very aberrant that why a society is wasting wealth or redistributing wealth in this particular manner. But it's a tool of gaining political power as well as social credit for fighting the times of scarcity. The last is polyandry. So for a normal society person where this monogamy is practiced, it may look like what kind of promiscuity this society is following. But if we go into the deeper reality of the Bhutia, we find that they live in a situation where there's a very limited resource in the terms of food as well as land. So if all the children marry, then there will be distribution of land, and it will create problem of smaller land holdings. And also women are considered as a burden in different difficult circumstances for getting subsistence benefits. So they are killed in the childhood, and there's a adverse sex ratio which leads to practice of polyandry. However, cultural relativism should not be understood as a moral relativism, because anthropologists also have to deal with the question of human rights. Anthropologists cannot say that because it's a practice of culture, so we are not interfering and respecting their culture. But they have to rather think it as a practice may be universally bad if it causes the human oppression or the violation of human right. For example, FGM. a harmful custom or operation inflicting mental and physical injuries is practiced by certain African tribes. Female genital mutilation may also lead to certain infections and trauma, which are a kind of human operation. Also, it was found in the Kuru disease was found among the four tribes of the Papua New Guinea, and it was due to the practice of ritual cannibalism, where they eat the brains of the dead, and when these brains are infected with a certain kind of protein, this lead to this Kuru disease in these four tribes. And also we can see in the Indian context how the Varna system was a mobile system where even the Shudras could become the Brahmins or the Kshatriya based on their qualities. But the modern caste system is oppressive in nature. There is no mobility theoretically, and there is also harmful practices like untouchability, which is against human respect. So anthropologists must take up their responsibility to protect human rights rather than shunning away their responsibility and protecting these practices which are against human rights. Then next is the fieldwork approach. Anthropology studies the first-hand study using different techniques for collecting data, and all the branches of anthropology is doing this. For example, Malinowski was the first person to do fieldwork among the programmed islanders and using the participant approach. In India also, H.D. Sankalia, Robert Brucewood, they did archaeological fieldwork and found out many important sites which we'll be discussing with the archaeological anthropology part. Also, M.N. Srinivas studied Sanskritization and L.P. Vidyarthi studied HM and spirit complex. And these later studies can also be studied by the anthropologists in the fieldwork. particular lecture, and the development of anthropology and the branches of anthropology will be discussed with the unit 1.3 in detail. Already this lecture has reached to length of 30 minutes, which is what I plan to be maximum limit of the lectures. Otherwise, it narrows our attention span. So, friends, this will be the first lecture completion, and we'll meet soon for the next lecture, which will be on the unit 1.3. I'll be skipping unit 1.2, which is not very important from my perspective. We'll be covering it in the end. Thank you.